Assalamu alaikum, everyone. First of all, I'm very sorry for being late. One of the things of working in the TV industry is that if you don't have everything sorted for Monday, then there'll be nothing to broadcast. So just a slight correction. I am no longer a freelance journalist. I am exclusively for TRT World. I did have my own show. So, before I begin, I'd just like to make it very clear that I'm still very much in the infant stages of my career. So I'm in no way a complete and absolute authority on how the media industry works. It's just simply my experience, and it isn't everyone's experience, and it isn't how everyone enters the industry. So I'll begin by telling you guys a little bit about how I got started. So I have always wanted to be a journalist, but I kind of put the plans on hold whilst I was studying at university. I thought I would take a different career path, because at that point, of course, you're quite naive. You don't know exactly what you want to do, and you're at university and you get introduced to lots of different things. So anyways, I think for me, what the turning point was when I saw a rise in the misrepresentation of how Muslims were being portrayed in the media. So that was the turning point for me, really. And I'd just like to, before I go any deeper into the conversation, this will probably bring the mood down ever so slightly, and I apologize for that in advance, but I think it's important to state the statistic. A survey conducted by City University last year revealed that the British journalism industry is 94% white and 86% university educated and 55% male. And the findings also reveal that 65% of journalists who have joined the profession over the last 3 years are female, but that women remain underpaid and underpromoted, while almost all ethnic groups and religions are significantly underrepresented. And the next most important bit that I think for everyone to remember is researchers reported that just 0.4% of British journalists are Muslim and only 0.2% are black. And nearly 5% of the UK population is Muslim and 3% is black. So you can already see that there's a major problem. And I often get asked, why journalism? In many of our communities, journalism is not thought of as a viable career path. Parents often advise their children to become doctors, lawyers, accountants, engineers, and I'm sure a lot of the Desi folk in here will testify to that and say that their parents have pushed them to a particular way. But no disrespect to parents, of course, we love them. I didn't decide I wanted to be a journalist because I had a conscious aim to alter the portrayal of Muslims and Islam. Because as a teenager, and as I mentioned a little bit earlier on, even when I was starting out at university, as much as I'd like to think that I was politically woke, I really wasn't. I was quite naive back then. And so I simply wanted to be in the media and join the journalism industry because of the fact that I was obsessed with news from a very young age. I grew up watching what's happening in the world. I was very, very young when the Bosnian War happened, and I used to watch my dad watching the footage over and over again. And for me, I was absolutely fascinated and engulfed with the fact that people's stories and trauma were being brought to my TV screen, and I thought, I want to do that. So that was, I think, my main driving factor as a child, and what really pushed me to go into the industry. However, of course, when there come that, with age and experience, and when you enter the workforce, and until you enter a particular industry, you are able to see the inner workings and functions of a place. And until that happens, you remain quite naive to the reality of how things work. So, as I mentioned, I didn't begin this journey with the conscious aim to change the portrayal of Muslims. But, of course, I grew up in a post 9/11 and post 7/7 society. So that feeling of being the other has always been a factor. But I didn't let it consume me. I wanted to be a journalist, like I said, because I really loved current affairs. However, once I actually began finding out more about the industry and doing internships and working within newsrooms, and that includes, mainstream media outlets, I found it almost impossible to ignore the way my religious identity is perceived. And when you see commentators being brought on channels who say that, Muslims are a problem, they're a fifth column, and things of that nature, you become very aware of your own Muslim identity. Now, I don't want people to think that my experience has been entirely negative as such, because it really hasn't. I've met some really incredible people along my journey so far, and who want to change the status quo, and are pushing for more diversity. But I would say that someone from a minority background, a person of colour, being a woman, and someone who wears the headscarf, you do have to work 100 times harder to be noticed and to be heard. I think I skipped a little bit, sorry. I'll tell you a little bit about what I actually did initially to carve my way into the world of journalism. I initially began writing, and it's interesting when this actually happened. I mentioned that I put my plans on hold for a little bit because I blame social media for this, because there are so many people out there right now who feel as though they have an authority to comment on what's going on in the world. Now, everyone has an opinion, and we respect everyone's opinion, but it's not always right, and it's not always, people's perception of things aren't always correct, and they put things out in quite a non-informed and irresponsible manner. And I didn't want to be just simply one of those. So after, Miqdad mentioned that I did a master's in Middle East and global politics, after I did that, I felt as though, okay, I have a slight backing and legitimacy to write about the Middle East. Again, I'm not an expert, I don't call myself an expert, but I felt as though my academic background, it gave me a bit more legitimacy to write about it. So when the invasion of Gaza happened back in 2014, of course, all of us were very moved by what was happening. A lot of us were outraged, of course. So that kind of gave me the push to start my own blog. And very quickly, a few months later, I began interning and writing for The Guardian. So things progressed quite fast, and I was quite lucky in that way. So I began as a print journalist, but as I mentioned to you guys earlier, seeing TV news and things come onto my TV screen was what really inspired me, and that's what I was working towards. My route and path has not been straight cut, and it hasn't been easy, whilst trying to maneuver myself and trying to hold down freelance media positions. I don't know if you guys, if there are any other journalists in the room, but journalists don't get paid a lot, especially if you're a minority, and so you have to make a living. So I was holding down a couple of different jobs. I was working for a local authority as well as doing different freelance positions. So it was, things were coming to me as and when they were, and I think I've been quite lucky in the last year and a half where I was given my own TV show on a channel called TV1, and it gave me the opportunity to really discuss issues that I was passionate about. So whether that be it issues regarding British Muslims, things that are happening in the developing world, women's issues. So that definitely was a great stepping stone. I was lucky the fact that it was something that belonged to I'm of Bangladeshi origin, so this channel is owned by Bengalis, and it was nice to be able to give back in a way to the community. And I think that probably takes me on to my next point, is that there's no doubt that Muslims have been misrepresented in the media in recent years, and hence why I think we need some of our own media outlets to have places where we can have particular discussions. And one of the reasons why Muslims in the media have been very misrepresented is partly due to the fact that most in the industry are still quite ignorant about Muslims and Islam for various reasons. And in order for that to change, we need people who are active in their community, have grassroots support and access to individuals to enter the media industry and be the ones who are helping to shape the news agenda. Now, I'd like to add that that doesn't mean that Muslims want to control the media or to completely shut down the critique of Islam, but there needs to be responsible reporting with the accurate facts and figures, and avoid stories that are embellished with provocative headlines. I currently don't work for a mainstream UK channel. but I have dabbled in and out of these places, or some of these newsrooms in the last couple of years, and it's important to stress that it isn't all bad, and there are people who are actively working to change the narrative and push for important stories that are relatable to all of us here. But undoubtedly there will be challenges, and the British media industry is highly unrepresentative of ethnic minority community. And if you just refer back to the statistics that I mentioned at the beginning, you know, if you walk into newsrooms in the UK, you will see that it's an overriding factor. There is a particular type of people that dominate it. But I think, you know, we are seeing change, and hopefully we will continue to see change over the next few years. And I think it's important for ethnic minorities and particular British Muslims to be positive about this, because there is this overriding sense of doom and gloom, and I don't think that's healthy and conducive for good community morale. So I'd just like to stress that it really isn't all that bad and bleak. Another way I think, you know, we will see a change in the industry is if more people like myself decide to take the chance and become a journalist. So whoever your parents out here, and if you have children that are at university, please do encourage them to join the university paper, to join the local media outlets, because it's so important that they gain these skills from a young age, and also become confident in speaking to individuals. I think one of the things that really holds some of us back is that we're not confident in speaking to people from those outside of our own communities. And if parents educate their children and say, actually, you know, you have a very unique position, being of a particular background and being of a particular religion, you know, you can educate others, and simply by being present in newsrooms, you know, interaction with others is the best form of education, and the best way to kind of debunk those myths that a lot of people have of British Muslims. And I was asked by a journalist at a major UK news channel whether I would be okay with being given a position simply because I'm an ethnic minority, or due to my religion. That was a difficult question for me to answer, because everyone wants to be recognised for their talent, hard work and skills. But at the same time, I thought to myself, when it comes to writing about British Muslims, would it not be better that I do it rather than someone who isn't from the community, who wouldn't know the entire narrative and the context to the issues and opportunities, to the issues that we face as a community and as individuals. And the opportunities that ethnic minorities get in journalism are so few and so rare. So I think sometimes you have to weigh these factors up and look at the bigger picture and see whether what you're being offered will be of greater benefit to the rest of the community. And I think we also have another problem in this age of social media, and I said this at the beginning, is people feel like they have the authority and the expertise to give their judgment and opinion on everything. And like I said, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but we have to be very careful. We have a moral responsibility to ensure that everything we say is accurate and is of benefit for the entire community. So there's no point in shooting our mouths off about Brexit or the war in Syria. We have to understand how it shapes the entire narrative, because anything we say, it just takes one soundbite to change people's opinion. So hence why it's really important. So, you know, we call out far right or right-wing media outlets and say that, you know, they're being provocative, they're being racist, but I think we also have a duty and responsibility to be careful with our words, because we are under a microscope at the moment. I think that could be seen as a good thing as well, because we have the opportunity to educate others about what we think and how we think things should be shaped. And, you know, at a time when we are already so misunderstood, we don't need the non-informed voices to drown out those who are sincere and working towards a positive change, just like Brother Miqdad is. Sometimes, you know, a lot of us think that we ourselves don't have the ability to do or change much. I don't know if there are any young sisters in here who are considering a career in the media industry. Whatever profession you decide to go down, a lot of us can think, I'm just one person. How am I going to change the perception of the entire country. I mean, first of all, no one's saying that you need to change the perception of the entire country. But first, you need to realise that if you decide to go into a profession, being an ethnic minority in this country, I feel, in my personal opinion, that you already have a moral obligation and a responsibility to go beyond what is important just for yourself. And I think especially for those who are from ethnic backgrounds and decide to enter the journalism industry, need to realise that we have even more of an onus to go beyond just ourselves and our own interests. And whether people like it or not, when you're somewhat in the public eye, you instantly become subject to scrutiny. So again, just stressing the fact that it's really, really important to take care of what you say, because it's so easy to just shoot your mouth off on social media. And there are so many things going on in the world, and I know that people feel so strongly about it, but it is important that we take care of what we say. And I'd just like to mention a quote from Maya Angelou about where she said, "I stand as one, but I come as 10,000. So going back to what I said about if you think that just as one person you can't change anything, just that one person can be a representative for so many different people. So yeah, I think it's if you are able to break into an industry or a profession where people like yourself aren't in or aren't represented, you have that extra responsibility to do that extra bit more. And my approach to eradicating Muslim stereotypes has always been to try and put forth the best version of myself. So there's no point in trying to change what's happening 10,000 miles away from your house. You first start with yourself. And for me, I think, it's important to bring to light what I've been taught as whilst I've grown up and what I've experienced being a British Muslim, a young British Muslim, and to relay that in the best possible manner to those that I work with. And yeah, so I mean, I think this is all I have to say in terms of my experience in the media. Sorry, I think I've gone very fast. I'm used to talking very quick. But I mean, if you have any specific questions, please do feel free to ask, and I will definitely elaborate on any points that I probably haven't said much on. Is that okay?
Salawat. Any questions?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Just a quick summary, trying to get to when you said there isn't enough people out there, but when all the mud was flying at Fatima Manji, I was expecting that people in journalism would gang up and defend her in every type of print and media possible. So do you actually have an organization like, where all the Muslims are, or the views that Muslims are not all terrorists, maybe make a group of it or something to that effect?
I think that's a good idea, to have a forum whereby Muslim journalists can connect with each other and do things collectively. When the whole thing about Fatima Manji happened, I'd just like to say that I did write an article about it, and I did call out, what was his name? Yes, that's it, Kelvin Mackenzie. And yeah, no, you're right. I think, but I also think that we have a problem where there is a lack of unity, and unfortunately, the media industry is a very competitive environment. So a lot of the times you find that, people are, and it's not, and I think I probably do it as well, I'm guilty of it, where you are just so focused in furthering your own career because you are fighting tooth and nail to put certain stories on the platform. So as somebody who's a Muslim woman of Bangladeshi origin, there are certain stories that are really important to me, and I want to push for those things. So we often do get engulfed and probably overwhelmed with those things that are important to us, we forget that actually, there are things going on around us that we need to address. But I definitely think that's a really important point that you made about having something where Muslim journalists, have a group where they're together and they address particular issues. And I think you're referring specifically to the Fatima Manji incident. People at Channel 4 News were not happy with what happened, and they did call it out 100%, and I know some of them personally. And I mean, I think it's just the way the industry is. some people will just sit back and not say anything. And another thing is that when you are a journalist in the TV industry, you have to also be quite careful with what you say and how you portray your opinions and views. But absolutely, when wrong is done, it should be called out. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
So do you think that if you had stayed in your career and gone with the mainstream media, surely what you want to do would be more easily, I mean, then at least the word will spread more rather than going into an ethnic minority media where only a few people can get it.
Absolutely. But the problem is the opportunities available in the mainstream media. So it's not easy. It's not easy. And I mean, currently I work for an international news channel, albeit new. It has a global reach. It's still obviously growing. But you're absolutely right. I think sometimes some people, not a lot, some people in the Muslim community say, actually, you know, Muslims shouldn't go into the mainstream media. I don't agree with that at all. You made, I think, a very valid point where obviously your reach will be much bigger if you are in the mainstream media. And I think if those opportunities come along, definitely take it. You're right, absolutely right. And the thing is, I have worked with some mainstream channels, but again, the opportunities are very far and in between, so it's not easy. But I think we need more people to enter the industry and to try and break into the industry to change that, because there aren't many. Because the thing is, it's a hard place to get into. So a lot of people attempt it, and when they realise the opportunities just aren't there, they give up. And I actually was at that point not too long ago where I just thought, I cannot fight this battle anymore. It's getting too hard. I'm getting old. You know, I want to be doing something stable. And it takes a lot. So you have to really be passionate and resilient when it comes to wanting to be a journalist, because, and this is for all people in general, and I don't just mean ethnic minorities. It is difficult for everyone to enter the world of journalism, and that's just a fact.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you very much. My question, before I put a disclaimer that I've got a son that works for TRT, so it's not an attack in any form, shape or form. But I often find that media is driven by an agenda, usually channels like Al Jazeera, TRT, including the BBC, I'm sure, who kind of mouthpieces for the government, really. In your experience, how much of that have you observed or noticed, and have you seen any changes, or are they just sort of, you know, they've got their chief executives who've got their mandate from the government, these are the news stories and this is how we will portray?
First of all, I think some people have a misconception about TRT World. It's not state-funded. It is funded by the people of Turkey. And we have complete editorial freedom to put on the channel what we want. So I'm a producer there. And I produce a particular program, a current affairs program that broadcasts daily. And it is us, the producers, who decide the topics and the people that we're going to have on the channel. And that itself shows you that we have a lot of autonomy as well as responsibility to ensure that we're putting good stories out there. So I personally haven't experienced this negative control or people trying to assert their authority, because at the end of the day, journalism is about reporting on the truth. And where I currently work is definitely committed to that. And I hope it continues along that path. You're right, most media outlets do have an agenda. But it is the responsibility of those who work for them and who are putting those stories out there. So as a news editor, as a producer, you have a lot of responsibility to put out particular words. When you're broadcasting something. So just one word can change people's perception. But I personally have had quite a positive experienced so far. Again, I've not been at the channel very long, but I will definitely say with full confidence that we have been given a lot of autonomy over what we're covering, and and I hope that it remains this way. And yeah, I hope that answers your question. Did you say you have a son that works for TRT World? Okay, in London?
Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for
Walaikum
coming to
salam.
speak to us. So getting into journalism is hard. You normally need kind of 10 years of experience in a field that has only been around for 2 years or so. Could you talk a bit about whether you've actually faced some of the, challenges that you felt have been specifically because you're a Muslim woman in the field?
Okay, I'll give you a little anecdote. Now, I don't know whether this was because I'm a Muslim woman or because I wear hijab, but I mean, you guys can come to that conclusion yourself. I went for a traineeship position. I got to the very final stages of it. I got to the interview stage of it. I psyched myself up for the interview. I prepared, met with the head of news of the channel, had an interview with the head of news, the head producer, all the big people you can think of. And I thought, okay, I'm almost there. And then I was told, okay, you've got to wait a week for us to interview the last candidate. So as a journalist, I put on my investigating hat and found out who this last candidate is. I discovered that it was the daughter of a news anchor who works for the channel. I waited a few weeks to find out the outcome. I wasn't hearing back. I got very impatient, so I called up and I said, what's happening? I've not got a response yet. And then I was made to wait another day after I got in touch. And then the person who interviewed me, the head of news, called me back and said, unfortunately, the position has been given to somebody else. You were very close, and it was between you and the last candidate that we interviewed. And I mean, that got me thinking two things. So, is it simply about who you know? And was I at more of a disadvantage because I am a person of colour and someone who wears the hijab? I'd like to think that it isn't for those things. I am an optimist, and I just like to think that maybe she had more experience than me. But just coincidentally, she did happen to be the daughter of a news anchor for the channel. So, I don't know. You guys can take what you want from that. But you're absolutely right. It is so hard. And like I said, I was very close to giving up. Because it can get very demoralizing. So I initially started off writing, and I was making pitches continuously to publications, and sometimes I got no response, sometimes I got a response saying thank you, but not this time. So when you constantly get the answer no, you get to a point where you think, am I ever going to get that yes? And is it worth me wasting this precious time? Because it gets mentally really exhausting. But like I said, you have to be really resilient and passionate about wanting to bring about change in your own community, and to also change other people's perception about your community. And for me, it's that responsibility that I felt towards people, because when I did start writing, Twitter is an amazing thing, because you get to summarize your entire life and experience in 140 characters. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But Twitter really does show you what people think about you. So when I initially started writing, it was the response that I got on Twitter, where people were messaging me saying, thank you so much for writing this. But I also got a lot of abuse from people saying, what on earth are you saying? You're an Islamist, you're this, you're that. But that made me realize, hold on, I've actually made an impact, albeit on a small number of people, but there are people out there that have read my work. So that gave me that motivation to just carry on, because once you've got yourself out there, and even if 500, 600, 700, 200, 300 people read your work, you realize that you are capable of causing some effect. And whether that's just a ripple in the ocean, it has to begin from somewhere.
Just a quick follow-up then. So you said that obviously one of the things you wanted to do is report more about your own community. I guess at a mainstream outlet, you'll see a lot more places like The Times, like The Guardian, reporting on smaller things that maybe 10, 15 years ago, they would have just ignored and looked at a national scale, but now they actually look into deeper issues within the community because the country perhaps is more divided, or just to shine a light on various issues. I guess, are you able to do that at TRT, or is it more focused on international?
I mean, it is an international news channel, so whatever we cover, we try and make it relevant to a global audience. But I'll just give you an example. When the Grenfell fire tragedy happened, we did a program. So the program that I currently work on, Roundtable, covers various topics. But when something so big happened, of course, we all felt the need to say something about it. Now, Grenfell is, people wouldn't have ever known what the Grenfell Tower was until that fire happened. People in Turkey wouldn't know what it was. People in Bangladesh or Zambia wouldn't know what it was. But because it was such a big topic, and because it reflected a bigger and wider issue for our country, we felt that obligation that we have to do something on it. But we made sure that we made it relevant to a global audience. So it was discussed in the light and prism of government policies and austerity. And these are things that people from across the world, I think, can relate to, whereby a particular people in a society are being given more importance and favoured over other individuals. So I'd say, to answer your question, yes, I think we are able to do that, TRT World. But of course, you have to keep in mind that it is a global news channel, but you just simply have to make it relevant. And there are so many ways that you can do those things to various stories. So definitely, I would say that TRT World enables us to do just that.
Any final question? Literally far.
Just out of interest, were you able to link the Grenfell fire to the fire in the factories in Bangladesh?
The fire in the factories in Bangladesh has also been discussed quite widely on TRT World. Did we? Yes, we actually did. We did. And we even had somebody on who made that connection. Yeah, so I don't know, does that answer your question?
That will make a much more impact
yes,
on your
no,
audience, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. We did make that connection. And there are so many ways, and this is the thing about journalism, there are so many ways to tell a story. And you just need to find something that people as a collective can relate to. So when the Rana Plaza tragedy happened, again, it reflected the horrendous conditions that people in the developing world work in. Again, this is not just an issue and a problem that's exclusive to Bangladesh. This is happening in many other developing parts of the world, and I think it shone the light on a big and wider issue, and just like Grenfell Tower, it did as well. I mean, there are countries in the Middle East and the Gulf that are that use the same type of cladding that Grenfell Tower had in it, and I think because of what happened, and because so many media outlets are talking about it, like Al Jazeera, for example, is also an international channel, but they were speaking about it. They put that microscope on it, and it began to question people around the world about how they are building their towers and tall buildings. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we'll end there. Salawat.
Okay. I'd just like to thank Brother Miqdad for inviting me here, and I apologise once again for being late. And I hope what I said was of some relevance, and I hope you guys gained something from it. Thank you so much for having me. Assalamu alaikum.
Hopefully Nishaat will be around for a few minutes afterwards if you have any questions you want to talk to her directly. Just a quick couple of announcements. Next week we have Tejiva, and she's going to be talking about